let's continue our conversation about part of that emotional angst that you're going through in that section that I called falling into, whether you're falling into the deep pit of despair of emotional angst or you're navigating through the swamp of emotional confarction, if you will, or you're starting to rise up from 60 feet below the surface or climbing the mountain to get across to the other side. Whatever analogy works for you, whatever visual that helps you move forward, stay with it, right? It just gives you something you can look at concretely and say, this kind of makes sense to me. I did use that example of the scuba diver once, and I had a client who said, I have no clue what that means. Okay, well, then we're not going to use that example. Let's use something from your frame of reference that'll help you put this in some kind of perspective. So what I want to talk about now is something that hits us all at some point in our life, but certainly when you're going through a divorce, the sense of self, the loss of your identity. For so long, you've been identified as the partner to someone else, and you've been identified in a relationship that you've been in, and now that identity is gone. You're not referred to as so-and-so, you're just referred to as so. With every loss like that, there's a grief process. Remember when I said earlier that the second leading cause of stress is divorce? Well, the first one is the loss of a loved one. And in many ways, it's the same thing. It's a loss of a relationship. Grief surfaces at times. Whether the relationship was good, bad, or indifferent, it's still a loss. Grief surfaces every time we lose something. It's just a matter of degree, how much grief surfaces. So don't be surprised that even though you think, man, this was just hard, I'm angry, can't believe my partner did this, I can't believe this happened, and suddenly, why do I feel so sad? Why do I feel like, oh, this is just like waking up in Christmas morning and there's no presents, there's nothing, there's not even a tree up anymore. I'm just lost. That happens. Don't be surprised by that. It's okay. It's another emotional part of us that surfaces in ways we're not even sure of. So grief and loss come because a relationship has been severed for whatever reason. How do we manage that? How do we get through grief and loss, right? Our identity is often tied into that relationship that we were in. So now how do we pull ourselves out of that and find our identity again? Who are we? What am I? It's been so long since I've just had to be me that I don't remember who that person is. It's all part of the process. It's another part of that wheel that we're trying to get moving again, to kind of get you in a good place to move forward and move on, because everything else has kept going. I've been off to the side for a little bit and I'm moving a little bit slower, but I'm still moving. So how do I find that sense of self that I lost in the relationship? And how do I claim that new identity? Here's something that's going to be difficult. I am a divorced person. Just saying that word is hard. And once that starts to settle in for you, that, yeah, I'm divorced, nobody wants to say that. Because now that gives you an identity that you didn't have before. I'm not married. I'm not in a relationship. You in a relationship? No, I'm divorced. Oh, people don't come up and hug you when you say that. When you say I'm in a relationship, they say, oh, really? How long? Who you been with? Oh, what's it going on? When you say, yeah, I'm divorced. Oh, I'm so sorry. Right? When do you hear sorry? When there's a loss, there's a grief. So allow yourself some time when it surfaces to spend that time in grief. Can't push it past you. You can't just ignore it because it'll surface. It'll grab you. It'll grab you if we don't pay attention to it. It's going to grab you and pull you in ways you don't want to go because now it's in another spiral. So when that grief starts to come up, it's okay to sit with it for a little bit. I know you hear that phrase all the time, just sit with your emotions. I don't know what always that means, but I think what it means is simply recognizing it, not trying to submerge it or push it away, but realize I can work through this too. I can allow this grief to not define me, but also put it in a place that says, yeah, this is a part of what I have to go through. And I can manage this just like I've been managing the other things. In addition to everything else, I can put this in a good place. So how do we find that part of us that we lost in our identity with our partner in that other relationship? And sometimes it is just taking some time and thinking back to who you were before the relationship. What part of you that maybe now that you're spending some time thinking about it, boy, I haven't done that in a long time. Whatever happened to me? And I'll go back to that example I gave of that client I had who used to play the piano. And I asked her once, I said, well, when was the last time you just played for yourself? Oh, years. I give lessons, but that's it. And I said, well, what stops you from playing? And the other thing is, we don't want to put a judgment on you to think, okay, I should be doing this more. Let's not look at it that way. Let's look at about what's stopping me from doing the things that brings me pleasure, my identity. What has kept me from being the person that I feel comfortable with? And for her, it was just this hard part to allow herself the freedom and the time to do the things that was part of her. Now, I cannot play an instrument. I have tried everything from a violin to drums to guitar to piano back to where finally the music teacher said, please do something else. You can't do this. But I marvel at people who know how to make music and create music. I don't know how they do it. I can't imagine. But I know from people I've talked to who do play musical instruments, there's a joy that they do. There's something about their identity that gets put into their music playing. And for her, because she played such classical music, there's a lot more that goes into it. So she had to memorize, she had to know. And she actually brought in a tape once and just let me hear one of the things it was amazing. It was unbelievable. But what stops, in this case, her or us, to find that part of us again that we've lost in the relationship? The thing that stopped us was probably the relationship. Not maybe always in a bad way, but because other things come from it. But now we're left just with us, our own person. I don't know who that person is anymore because I put so much into this relationship, I forgot who I am. And that's a hard place to figure out. So some of it is just getting back to kind of the basics. Remind yourself, well, when I was in college, I used to do this. I had a client who used to dance. She did dance classes and she loved it. And I said, well, what stops you from doing it? Well, I don't know. Well, we were always doing so. Okay, great. I had one client, he said, I used to love to go for hikes. I would go out, I'd drive like half an hour, go through the woods. Well, my partner never liked that. So we didn't do it. We did other things that are like, okay, it's okay to start picking that up again. But sometimes we just have to remind ourselves, what did I do before I got in this relationship that I really liked? So take some time, give yourself some space while you're eating that ice cream or having that donut in the morning, remembering, I used to do this a lot, but I don't do that anymore. Because that's just part of your identity. It's part of you. It's not another chore. It's not another task. Oh, I've got to go for that hike this afternoon. It's not part of self-care, which is sometimes confusing with, for some people we talk about self-care and they think, okay, that's one more thing I have to do. Let's reframe that. Let's not call it self-care. Let's call it self-identity. What about me that has been lost in a relationship that I need to go find again? Let me allow myself the freedom to go take that walk in the woods, like that one man said. I just love being out in nature for half an hour. I felt so good. But we don't do it anymore. What stops you from playing that piano? Well, no. Okay. Well, now give yourself the freedom to do that. And imagine what the house or the apartment would sound like, filling it with that wonderful music. And she, it just that whole process of, I forgot that what I'm creating, that my part of my identity is coming out in my music, just surrounds the place so much. And you get embraced by it so much. And just recognizing what works for you. You might have people tell you, well, you need to journal. You might need to do this and do that. Okay, if you journal before, then do it. But if not, then don't do that. We don't want to add more burdens to you. We don't want another task or another job. You got enough. You got enough just to get through the day. But let's look at ways, find for yourself those things about you, the loss that you had. And it might be getting involved in groups or organizations that maybe you didn't before because your partner or you didn't have time or they weren't connected. It might be something with your spiritual aspect of your life. Maybe you haven't been connected with a church at some point or a synagogue or a mosque because the relationship just took on so much. It's okay to step back into that. Now, I know that could be difficult. I know sometimes there's some judgment and you feel when we talk about shame, I don't want to go back to that group that I used to meet with from work because, they know that I'm divorced. That's their problem. Let them deal with that. You step into it and you know what? You can proudly say, yeah, I'm divorced and I'm doing okay. and it's not my fault. I've tried and it just didn't work. How are you? Right? Don't get caught up in that, because that's where we deceive ourselves. So when we're trying to find our identity, we're trying to find that sense of self again. Right? And there's a difference between being alone and loneliness. We could be alone, we're okay. But loneliness sets in even if you're in a crowded room, because we've lost who we are. We're not comfortable being this person again because we lost it in the relationship for somehow. Or we think, I'm a bad person, going back to shame, that I shouldn't allow myself to do these things. It's a process. It takes time. But just remember, there was a part of you before the relationship. There was a part of you that was doing okay. You were not defined by your relationship. We define you sometimes because you're in a relationship. But now that you're not so-and-so, and you're just so, it's time to find so again. Find it somewhere. It's in there. And it's not because of what you do as work. It doesn't mean because if you're a parent. It means because who you are as a person. And you have been stripped down to the very core. There's not much that hasn't been taken away in so many aspects that you have to try and find it. It's not easy. It's going to take some time. You might even have to go back and look at some pictures from high school, college. Remind yourself that when you were doing this, you had a good time. The person who used to go dance classes or go to the gym and work out, they loved it. But they stopped going because of other things. And when they started going back in, and here's the other part. Now I have to go back in, and I think everybody knows that I'm divorced or I'm by myself. They really don't. That's the self-deception we create within ourselves, that we think everybody knows what I'm going through. Well, unless I've told everybody, they don't know. And here's the thing, even if they do, who cares? This is developing that new attitude. We're going to talk in a later conversation about how we navigate through life now with the fact that we have this letter on our heads that says we're divorced. And it's okay to say, you know what? I don't care. I'm okay. I can move forward with this. So finding your sense of self again, finding what you did for you that brought you that sense of identity, the sense of joy, the sense of connecting, just being able to feel, oh, I remember this. This is like an old friend I haven't picked up in a long time. You know how it feels when you meet somebody and you haven't seen them for a long time? It's kind of nice, especially if you had a good relationship with them. If not, then, but it's okay. You know, find those friends, if you will, that you haven't discovered for a long time. Contact someone that maybe you haven't talked to in 10 or 15 years, and you used to have such a nice conversation with them because you got pulled away because you were in a relationship. That allows you to find that identity again. And you'd be surprised. A lot of people that you haven't talked to for a while suddenly are excited that you called them. What's been going on? And you tell them, yeah, I'm divorced. Oh, I'm so sorry. Well, what else? Oh, do you remember when we used to do this? Remember all that stuff? Oh my gosh, we had so much fun. That's where the search comes in. It's the search again to find out what was part of you before the relationship. And what did I do so much that I enjoyed it? Playing the piano, taking a walk in the woods, dancing, going for a bike ride. Anything that you do or that you've done prior to a relationship, it's still there. It's still there. We just got to find it again. We have to dig through all this other stuff to find it because it's waiting for you. It's just waiting for you to rediscover it and move on into the next place.